Hey everyone, Claire here, and today I'm going to be doing an ICe resin project, and I'm going to be doing some collages in some of the Art Mechanique hobnail bezels. I'm going to be using the circle ones and the square one. I'm also going to be using the Art Mechanique paper, and this is in the Bells and Dames book. It's really cool collage paper. And I'm going to be using words which are found in the Rue Romantique book. And there you go. So let's get into the project. And the best way to cut out a piece of paper to fit inside a bezel is to actually stamp the bezel. So I'm inking up with a sponge ink pad in a very light colour, and I'm going to use it as if I would be stamping. And I created this technique a few years ago now, and it works perfectly every time, as you can see. So I'm going to repeat that process with every single bezel, and I just used a pigment ink from Imagine Crafts, so it won't damage anything while I'm doing it. And it's easy clean up with a baby wipe as well, so you know, it's all good. So you can see here I've chosen the 3 parts of the paper that I want. And once I've stamped them out, I am just going to take a pair of scissors and I'm going to cut it out just on the inside of the line. You do need to make sure that you cut out on the inside of the line. If you cut out on the outside of the line or directly on the line, it won't fit into your bezel, so you will have to do some fixing and changing of the shape. So here we go. I'm just using a pair of scissors and I'm going to cut all them 3 out, and I'm probably going to fast forward here. And here we are. As you can see, I am cutting out on the inside, just touching the inside of the line. And it's tried and tested. It works brilliantly every single time. Unless obviously your bezel is not a straight bezel wall. If it leans in a little bit, then it might be a tad too small. If your bezel wall leans out a bit, it will be a tad too big. But as you can see here, that is a perfect fit. So I'm going to cut them all out and I'm going to fast forward. And you can see there it's such a perfect fit that I had to use a poke tool to actually get the paper out. Right, so moving on, I'm going to cut out the words that I want, and I'm just going to stick them down onto the sheet with a little bit of Pritt stick, which doesn't seem to have actually recorded. But there we go. So the only problem with the Rue Romantique book is when you're cutting out the words that are in there, you're actually ruining the images that are on the back. And it's actually photos, vintage photos, which is a bit of a shame. But you do get more than one sheet, and in the book you do get a couple of copies of each one. I'm not sure how available those books are now because, of course, ICe Resin have been taken over by Ranger, so I'm not sure what's available. I haven't been on the design team for over a year now, so and I've kind of lost track of what they do because the products are actually really hard to get into the UK, and trying to find them is really difficult. So I've not been doing as many resin projects as I probably should, being the UK educator, but I'm not really getting any support on how to actually get hold of the products to teach, so don't ask me to do a class because I probably can't get the stuff that I need to actually teach it. Anyway, moving on, I'm using the glue and seal, and I'm going to coat the inside of the bezel with the glue and seal, a really good coat, and then I'm going to stick in the bezel, and I'm using the glue and seal to stick the wording where I want it. Make sure you press down really well, make sure that you coat really well, because as we all know, if you use resin on paper, it turns it transparent. I have a few tutorials on making resin paper on my channel, and that's not the effect that I'm wanting to go for. So I'm going to glue them all in, and I'm going to coat them all really well with glue and seal, and then I'm going to leave them to dry. And I do help them with a heat tool occasionally, but then I'm going to do a second, and I actually do 3 coats in total of the glue and seal. If you don't have glue and seal, you can just use a matte medium or any sort of paper medium, and at a push you can use PVA glue, but the PVA glue sometimes goes misty and milky, so just be wary if you do that. A gel medium is much better to do it with. And you don't really want to see me coating all 3 and drying all 3 off, so I am going to fast forward from here. Alright, we are into the resin part. So, as usual, follow the manufacturer's instructions. I'm using ICe Resin Part A and Part B. If it's cold out, Part A is pretty thick and gloopy and impossible to actually squeeze out of the nib sometimes. So, unless you're a She-Hulk, what I tend to do is if I'm going to be mixing a large amount, so I will just take the top off and just squidge it out that way. And you can, if you warm the bottle slightly, holding it in your hand, I'll leave it on the radiator for maximum 1 minute, just part A, not part B, and that will make it a lot easier to use. So mix equal parts A and equal parts B together, and don't forget when you are stirring that you are not whipping it. ICe resin is pretty good in the fact that it has a bubble release system to it, but if you whip bubbles into it, you're going to make that task pretty much impossible for yourself. So just make life easier and just stir it better. And do remember that you need to stir thoroughly and make sure you get all of the edges and wipe off your stick regularly, and you do need to do that for roughly 2 minutes. When you stir in the resin, you will see striations and they will gradually disappear, and that is what you want. So once you've stirred, I'll leave it to sit for roughly 2 to 3 minutes and let the bubbles evaporate and pop. And when I'm actually going back and looking at videos and editing videos, it's quite fun. I can actually watch the bubbles rise to the surface and pop on their own, but I edit that out because you don't want to see that. Moving on, I am filling all of my bezels, and the squeezy cups, the mixing cups, are actually fantastic because you can make a really fine little spout on them, as you will see, and it makes it really easy and simple to pour. So what I'm doing is I'm pouring a small amount into every bezel, and then I'm going to wiggle them about and make sure the resin goes into every corner. I find this is a much easier way to do it. I would stick something in it and poke it about to make it go where I want it to quicker, but you risk getting dirt into your resin, and that is the last thing that you want to do. So I'm just topping them all up and making them flat, and then I will come back and check them periodically to make sure that all of the bubbles have escaped. Sometimes they get trapped on the sides, or if you've got embellishments they can get trapped, so you need to be aware of that when you're doing it. Make sure that you cover your resin with a net of some sort so you don't get dust in it, because the last thing you want to be doing is having to drill out dust or sand out a dirt patch. I left the bezels to cure overnight, and this is the next day, and it was quite cold this day, I remember. So what I have actually done, look at the shine on that, isn't it beautiful? I'm going to do a doming layer, and when I came to do my doming layer, I noticed that this one has actually got a bubble stuck in it. Can you see that there? So what I'm doing is taking a pokey tool and I'm jamming it in there to open up the bubble. So when I do my doming layer, I will push resin into that and it will seamlessly disappear. So I've mixed a new batch of resin and I'm just holding it in my hand, and the warmth of my hand will actually make the bubbles in it come out quicker. Don't put it on the radiator. If you do, only for a few seconds, and because heat it will make it cure quicker. But just warming it up a little bit in your hand will make the bubbles release and come to the surface quicker. So while I'm waiting for that to happen, I get Princess Tigress visiting, and she must be a bit bored, or I'm not quite sure. This was recorded a couple of years ago. I think maybe she was wanting feeding, but she comes and stays a few times. Just remember that resin, if it gets on the paws, you can clean it up if it gets on your hands with a baby wipe, but ideally you don't want your animals in the room while you're doing it. I'm watching her very carefully at what she's doing. She helps quite a lot, and her brother comes on and helps quite a lot too. He gets bored very quickly though, and she kind of tells him off a bit. She's like, "Oh, get out. This is my table." So I've got rid of them and evicted them from the room, and now I'm going to put my doming layer on top. Creating a doming layer is really easy, so I need to get rid of that bubble hole first. So I've put a blob of resin on it, and I'm taking my pokey tool and I am making sure that I push that resin down into that bubble, and because it seamlessly joins, it will be completely gone once it's totally cured, and you will never know that that was there. So now I've done that and had inspected it and I'm happy with it, I am going to put more resin on top of each one. Now, to do a doming layer, you want to go directly in the middle. So you can see I'm pouring the resin directly in the middle, and you want it to be thicker in the middle and thinner on the outsides. So when you put this to dry and to cure, you need to make sure when you're doing a doming layer that it is on a completely level surface. I recommend using a board and propping it and putting a spirit level on it to make sure that it's completely level. Otherwise your dome will be completely off kilter and off to one side. So because of the temperature, the resin wasn't actually behaving as it should. So I give it a little bit of a hand and a little bit of a poke with the mixing stick, and then I've just topped them all off. Now, unfortunately, because these were gifts, I don't actually have a finished project picture. But what I did was take some of the sari silk that you can get pretty much everywhere. And here's a tip, don't wash it because the colour just runs straight out of it. So I took the sari silk and I turned them into dangles. And a good friend of mine, Darcy UK, she made some bags and we hung them off the bags. They came out really, really well. So once I've done with the doming layer, you can see I'm topping it up just ever so slightly. I left these to cure for 24 hours because I knew that they would be taking pretty much a bashing as soon as they were given, and left them, and yeah, they were perfect. So here is a bit of a close-up of the finish, and you can see the reflection of that beautiful dome. I hope you've enjoyed my video, and I hope you're enjoying all of my videos at the moment. I do appreciate all of your comments and all of your likes. Thanks so much for watching, and thanks so much for supporting me. If there's anything that you want me to show you, please let me know. Bye!